Hey, this is Dynasty Coach A, and you're listening to the Dynasty Hotseat.
Yes, hello everybody, and welcome back once again to the Dynasty Hotseat. It's the only Dynasty show out there that is a certified Inferno, and we've got a very welcome return guest. We got Dynasty Coach John himself from the dynastyworkshop.com. By the way, we're just having a chat about that website off the air. It sounds great, John. It's great to see you back in the show, mate. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. It's been a long time coming. I know we've been trying to make this work for about 6 months now or something like that. So at least it feels like that. So yeah, it's great to be back. I love talking about Devi and especially once we get into rookie modes, like it's so much fun. And you know, if you remember, I don't know if you remember or not, but I tend to be a little different than consensus, especially early on. And I don't know if you remember the last time I was on, but I was very different on one Jackson Dart. And I was saying, hey, like, I know this is not consensus, but hey, you got to have Jackson Dart up here. I'll probably have a couple of those today as well.
I love it. I cannot wait to see what you've got in store for this 2026 class. And welcome aboard all new listeners. If you've not already, hitting that like and subscribe is absolutely fantastic for the channel. Make sure you don't miss another video. And of course, for any return viewers, welcome back. Nice to see you again. John, before we jump right into this and who you've got at 101, etc., do you have any general takes on the class in general? Like, what's your wide outlook for this 26 draft class as it stands right now?
I think this is going to be a class that consensus is going to dislike, especially once, you know, everyone picks players apart as we get closer to the rookie season and the NFL draft. And so once everyone's picked apart all of these players, because so many of them don't have perfect profiles and everything like that, I think this year is going to be the class of actual sleepers. You know, and you know, like maybe once we get to that point, because obviously everyone diagnoses every player, maybe they won't truly be sleepers. But I think like it's going to be like a year of values where, you know, a player that I love, you know, and maybe he's my wide receiver 6 in the class or something like that. I have a feeling a player like that might go like wide receiver 12. By consensus. And so, you know, it's like one of those guys that I'm just always going to get him. You know, it was kind of like Rondé Gadsden this year. I have 42% Rondé Gadsden in my dynasty leagues because people were so out on him. I mean, you know, he doesn't weigh enough and he doesn't do this enough. And I'm like, did you guys watch him play football? You know, I don't really care. And then like come to find out he gained 20 pounds and he did this and he kept all his athleticism. And now, I mean, it's hurting me this week because he's on a bye, but you know, 42% has saved me with my Tucker Kraft and you know, other tight ends getting hurt and everything. So I think it's going to be the year of values if you play your cards right, but it's really going to be about avoiding those misses almost more importantly than trying to get the values, because I think there will be quite a few misses along the way as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on with that miss as well. I'm sure we might get to some of those players soon, but let's start off at the top as is normal. And John, we're going to start off with the 101. Which player at the minute? Now, obviously, we don't know who's declaring and everything, but as it stands right now, who's your 101 in this 2026 draft class?
So my 101 has not changed since probably like, I don't know, October of last year, and it's Jordan Tyson. I know most people are kind of leaning towards the running back, leaning towards Jeremiah Love now for the 101. I really feel like it's because the running back class is so bad that, or at least, you know, like the depth in the running back class is so bad that people are like, oh, well, here's this one that's so much higher than the other, so he clearly has to be 101. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And, you know, not to say that I don't like the player or anything like that. Jordan Tyson is just an absolute stud. He can play inside and out. He has all the athleticism in the world. Big playability, deep threat, intermediate threat. Like he's an actual route runner. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He has literally everything you would want in a receiver. The only knock you could really possibly say about him is his health. He hasn't always been the healthiest player. In fact, he just came back this past week or yesterday. He just came back from a 4-week, maybe even longer hamstring injury. So that's the only thing you can possibly say. But the upside for this player is that he's an absolute stud, and it hasn't really been I mean, he tore his ACL. He missed basically 2 years because of that, and then he's had some more like different various injuries since then. But they've all been random. It hasn't been the knee over and over again. So it's not enough for me to be scared away by him. I have a feeling he's going to be drafted in the top 15 at the very least, and possibly the top 10 of the NFL draft. And I've actually seen. I think what was it recently? I'm trying to remember who it was, but it was to a team that could. Oh, it was the Giants. It was the Giants drafting him in a recent mock draft, and it was like, think about Jackson Dart, Malik Neighbors, and Jordan Tyson. Like, holy crap, that would be unbelievable. So. So yeah, give me Jordan Tyson 101. I honestly don't, unless something drastically changes or whatever. Like I said, he's back. He played this week. Unfortunately, it was with his backup QB, so it wasn't some amazing game. He had 2 catches for like 70 yards or whatever it was, but it was good to see him back on the field. As long as he goes through and does what I expect him to do, I don't see any reason why it would change, at least for me personally.
It's quite difficult to like read into the unseen things like players' character and things like that. We don't really get to see that, but does it kind of tell you anything about Jordan Tyson? He could have sat out the rest of the season quite easily. Like, he didn't have to come back, but the fact that he's coming back and playing for his teammates, that's a tick for me.
I think it's a huge thing, and his coach just mentioned it on Friday or Saturday or whenever he was interviewed. He said the same thing. He said, "Hey, this kid didn't really have to come back. Like we're not going to the playoffs. We're not doing anything. He really didn't have to come back. His starting QB's not there, and yet here he is. He just wants to play football. And those are the kind of players that you fall in love with."
Yeah, I absolutely have no arguments for me taking Tyson at 101. Who's coming up next at 102 for you?
I told you I had to switch over from Dynasty mode to Devi mode. So give me 1 second, because I thought I was gonna be prepared for this, and I'm absolutely not.
That's absolutely fine.
So the funny thing is, I told you I'm not the guy that just goes with consensus or anything like that. There was going to be some surprises. Yep. This might already be a surprise for some of your listeners. I'm going with CARNELL Tate out of Ohio State, and I think that he is not getting enough love because he's been behind Jeremiah Smith. He's been behind Emeka Egbuka. Now people realize how good Emeka Egbuka is or can be, and everything. So now just think about the fact that he was basically the third fiddle last year. Now he's the second fiddle behind a still studly guy battling other 4 and 5 star wide receivers and still dominating. And I always kind of had question marks with Tate even going into this season. Was he athletic enough? Was he this? Was that? A lot of things I had heard from the film grinders of the community. And so I always had kind of like I always took a step back and said, well, maybe he's just not going to be. I think he's answered all of that this year. He's taken a step forward, and the big plays that he didn't necessarily used to have. His PPR points per touch have gone up. Everything has gone up, which is probably to be expected. Emeka Egbuka left, but it was the question of, can he take that next step, and he has. And so at that point, it's another player who can be an X, can play on the inside, can play on the outside, can do whatever you want for him. And we have some of those players in this draft, but we don't have a lot of them, at least that are like, you would consider a stud or anything like that. So Tate is one. Now he's starting to get first round draft capital buzz and things like that. And I think when it's all said and done, he's going to be a first round DC kind of guy. He's basically answered all the questions I've had, and I'm not going to discount him because he played behind true studs in MHJ and Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, give me CARNELL Tate here at 102. I'm feeling pretty solid about both of them. I know there's a wide receiver that's definitely risen this year for most people, and they're probably going to be like, when are you going to mention his name? We'll get to him, but I'm pretty happy with these two as like my 101 and 102 for now.
Yeah, I mean, death, taxes, and Ohio State wide receivers. You just know that guy's got every tool in his belt, and like it is like you will see a lot of people mention Emeka Egbuka whenever you're talking about CARNELL Tate, but it's more the fact that he's an underlooked kind of player rather than they're not very similar players. I would say Tate's more of like a downfield threat from what I see, and what I've been really impressed with Tate this year in particular. but some of the adjustments that he makes mid-air and some of the body control that he has is exceptionally good. So I think if you're looking for one thing to look out for with CARNELL Tate, it's not because Julian Sain's underthrowing him every week, maybe, but we might get to Julian Sain on another date. Let's roll on to your 103 now, though, John. Who have you got?
All right, so this is where I will transition over to the running backs, and I will say Jeremiah Love is a great running back. I don't know if he's special. A lot of people are trying to comp him to Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think he's Jahmyr Gibbs level, but that doesn't mean that I hate the guy or that I don't think he's good. And so I'm willing to take him here at 103. It's just it's so tough with. He's had some size concerns. He's definitely had some consistency concerns with, his freshman year. I was completely out on him, and then I had to go on the Debbie devotional and just be like, "Hey, I was wrong," after year two, because the dude just went from kind of like a plotter to, which he wasn't even that big, so it was weird that he was a plotter. He didn't have any big time runs. He didn't have anything to all of a sudden 1,400 yards and breaking huge plays and all that kind of stuff. And then it was like, okay, well, can he do it again? And it was a slow start this year. So at the beginning of the year, I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work out or not. But down the stretch, holy crap! Like he has turned it around, and he's proven that he definitely deserves to be the RB1 at the very least. I really won't nitpick people that are like, oh, he should be the 101 too much. I do think I lean towards those wide receivers more, for the longevity of the position, size, maybe some slight size concerns for Love, landing spot. There's people talking about him being a top 15 running back or a top 15 draft pick, in this class. And I don't think I think that's crazy. I don't really see that happening. But if it were to happen, are we talking about another Ashton Genty kind of deal where you're dealing with a really crappy team with a bad O-line who, can't get him the ball or get him into space and do what he needs to do? I could easily see that happening. And so all those things considered, obviously if he lands in some amazing spot, maybe I'll have to change my mind. But for now, I'm going with the safety of the wide receivers and the upside of the wide receivers as well. But then I'm perfectly happy having Love there at 3.
Yeah, what I've liked a lot, you kind of mentioned earlier, John, that he did start off slow, and I was noticing at the start, like what kind of player is he? Like I was trying to figure out what does he do, and as we kind of gone through, I've noticed his speed has noticeably increased. He's not getting caught from behind anymore like he was in the first couple of weeks. And what I really like about Love in particular, and let me know if you agree or not, is the way he can transition between the power game and the finesse game. That's his real strength for me.
Yeah, especially early on, his size wasn't really there. Now I think he's creeping up closer to like the 210 or 215 range now, so maybe we can really get the size concerns out of there. But it's always kind of been in the back of my mind. And I'm not the sizes. Like I was always in on Gibbs, I was always in on A-Chan. So like this is not me being some like, oh my god, he didn't hit this threshold for size. But like you do have to think about it at the same time. Because unfortunately, as much as we might not care, some of these coaches do, and they're like, well, he's not 215 pounds, so we can't give him the ball every play. But I think he's proven that, like you said, he has the ability to do basically whatever you want. And, I wasn't really putting him down when I was saying he's not Jahmyr Gibbs, but he's not that level of burst and speed and things like that. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have that ability. And he actually does have a nice ability of being able to get you the 3 yards when you need the 3 yards, or get you the 30 yards when you need the 30 yards.
Yeah, absolutely. Just say for people at home, if you want to see quite a fun highlight, watch his, I believe it was the second touchdown against Navy, where there was like 9 Navy players trying to break him down, and they could not get that. More on the Navy defense, I think, but still an excellent highlight to go watch. So we've got him at 3. Who's next for you, John, at the 104?
All right, so this is where I honestly start to struggle because there's players that I like that I'm not sure are going to come out, and so that kind of makes it tough for and I'm as much as I do this and everything, I don't know if you guys have a way of knowing who's going to come out and who's not beyond beyond like what the websites are telling you or mock drafts are telling you and like stuff like that. I have no idea. I just know the players that I like and the players that I don't like and all that. I am going to go with man, I thought about going QB here, but I'm still not ready to go QB, even though this is super flex, correct? Right? We always do super flex. Okay, yeah. I'm not ready to go QB just yet, and I'm not ready to go that wide receiver that everyone wants me to go right now, just because I'll tell you why once we get to that player. I am going to go with Elijah SERRAT. And this is a player that I don't think is going to get nearly as much love as he should until maybe he gets drafted. He goes out and does what he can do at the combine. I will admit that I've heard on the last 2 podcasts that I've listened to, I listen to a lot of pods while I'm working. I put my headphones in, I listen to a lot of pods. And so I get a great mix of just about what everyone's thinking. And the last 2 podcasts I've listened to for Devy purposes both mention him as a possible first-round draft pick. And so I love that he is possibly, at least he's kind of getting that recognition now, which I don't think he always was. And, I think his QB has gotten a lot of the recognition, but maybe more recently we've started seeing that transferring over to the wide receiver position a little bit, where people are starting to notice Elijah SERRAT. People are starting to notice Omar Cooper Jr. and saying, like, man, these guys are actually doing pretty studly things. And there's a reason why I'm taking him before his QB and Fernando Mendoza, because I do have a feeling that it at least has something to do with those wide receivers. SERRAT's been a player that I was a huge fan of. In fact, I don't know if the listeners will remember. Obviously, there's probably new ones and everything. But the way that I do everything is through a system that I created called Beth. I hate using the word model, so I don't use it. I either say system or I say Beth, and it's just a dumb name that I gave it. It doesn't mean anything. Don't try to read into it. It's just a dumb name I gave. So, but in that system, SERRAT was so high going into the offseason that I actually felt like with the amount of love that he was not getting, the amount of disrespect that he was getting, I felt like, okay, this is just a player I'm wrong on. And so I manually discounted him in Beth just to be closer to what consensus was saying. And I do that every once in a while. Just sometimes players just have one thing that kind of makes them jump up, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So if I feel like maybe I'm too high on a player, I'll manually adjust him. Well, with SERRAT, I did that, and I kind of forgot that I did that. And so he was down in the mix, and then I'm going through the system, and I'm just double checking numbers and doing all that one day, and I go, now why do I have this discount on it? Oh yeah, I did that in the off season. Took away the discount. He skyrockets back up even after the season, and I'm like, yeah, I was not as high on SERRAT throughout this entire season as I should have been, because I discounted him because consensus didn't like him. And yet here we are. He's still looking great at the end. 32% market share, almost 4 PPR points per touch. Like, there's nothing that you shouldn't like about this player. He's got size, he's got speed, he's got everything. The only thing you can say is he's a senior, but I think we're past like freaking out about a player being a senior and in this day and age. So I think it's another one that you can say can kind of do it all, inside, outside, whatever. Definitely. Has that size and speed, and I think this will be a surprise for most people. I don't think most people will have him here, but that's where I have Elijah SERRAT at 104.
I love it. He's absolutely tons of fun to watch for sure. And I've got the one note I've really got on SERRAT here is that he sort of the first note I made on him is like he shows up everywhere. Like, he runs everything. There's no like expected place you're going to imagine SERRAT to appear. He's just going to appear somewhere, and it's usually in the right place. And before I got to ask, is Beth, is that an acronym for something, or is that just a name that you give?
No, so I don't know if you remember FF_Spaceman in the Dynasty space. He kind of got me started on everything. Honestly, when I started, I didn't even hardly know how to use Excel, much less like create a model or anything like that. And so I started talking with him. We used to do a happy hour every Friday, so I would talk with Dave every Friday night, and we just sit there and drink and talk about stats and whatever else. And I mean, there was other people there as well, but like, we always connected with the stat stuff. And one day I kept saying, I hate the word model. I hate saying my model, like all that kind of stuff. And he was like, well, you should name it. Like, it should be a model. Like, it should be a girl's name, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, or what's a good model's name? And he jokingly said Beth. And I'm like, well, that's not a model's name at all. And he's like, yeah, but that's what makes it so funny. I said, all right, perfect. So it's the dumbest thing and it confuses people like crazy. But, I've run with it for the past, 5, 6 years.
I love it. Drinking beer and talking stats with Dave sounds like an amazing hour to spend for sure. So
Oh,
love
it
getting
was, yeah, it was a good time.
yeah, definitely. Serrat's in there at 4. Love the pick there. Who's right up next at pick number 5? Are you feeling zesty yet? Is that the player I'm imagining you're teasing?
Yeah, I think I am here. I considered going QB here. I'm not ready to go another running back, which should tell you something at least about how I feel about the running backs
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
I'm just not ready to do it just yet. And I think I am finally ready to take the player that people have probably been screaming at their phones or computers or whatever. I'm going to take Makai Lemon here at 105. I actually did like a quick mock like a month ago, and I had him at my 107. So he's moved up a little bit for me in the past couple of weeks. Before those, now this past game was not great. Well, he actually had 3 touchdowns, but he only had like 4 receptions for 30 yards or something like that. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but he threw for a touchdown and caught 2 touchdowns. So like points wise, you're probably happy if you have him in CFF or whatever. But if you're looking at the actual numbers, probably not the greatest game. But the 2 games before that, he was actually a completely different player than he's been just about the entire rest of the season. And I did a what we call a grudge match on the Debbie Devotional with my co-host because he was all about Lemon, and I was like, let's pump the brakes. He's not the player that I think people are trying to make him out to be. And I gave a bunch of reasons, and the biggest one was the ADOT. You look at these players that have like a below 10 ADOT in their career, and they just rarely become something huge in the NFL. Not to say that they can't have a role, not to say they can't do anything, but they're rarely like that wide receiver 1 you want them to be. And in fact, there's only one player right now in the NFL who runs over 80% of slot routes in the NFL each week and is in the top 24 of Dynasty wide receivers, or I'm sorry, of top 24 of wide receivers this year. Can you tell me who it is?
Is Jackson Smith and Jigba still running out the slot?
Yep.
Normally? Yeah.
Yep. It's JSN. He's the only one that runs over 80%. Every other player is outside of the top 24. So you're already saying, and I think we can all agree that Makai Lemon's not JSN. I know there was obviously like a weird thing with him barely playing his junior year and all that kind of stuff, but like JSN was a stud. Let's just remember that Makai Lemon's not to that level. So this is not me hating the player, but it's really just saying like the ceiling isn't quite there because he's going to be a slot only player when he gets to the NFL, or they're going to drastically change who he is as a player. And I haven't seen enough. He doesn't even have the size of a JSN. He's a little bit smaller. And then once again, I'm not the size of this guy that's like, oh, he can't possibly be good. But we have to look at these things and say he's a little smaller. I recently did a comp on the Debbie Devotional. I gave him Ladd McConkey. And, people can love or hate that or whatever. And, people say, oh, Ladd was great last year. Well, yeah, Ladd was great last year when no one was there. Now, this year, we kind of see who he is. And he can have good games. He can have great games even. He's probably not going to consistently be a wide receiver 1 or anything like that. And I think that's what we'll probably see from Lemon. So once again, I know I'm not going to get him here at 105 because there's people trying to push Lemon up to 101 and 102 and pushing him above Jordan Tyson, doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you're never going to catch me there. I don't mind taking him here at 5, and if he obviously falls to me, I'll be perfectly fine. But I would assume that somebody else is going to take him, and it's one of those things where I'm perfectly fine with it. I just don't see the ceiling really.
I would love to see, because I think when I watch USC, their whole entire game plan at the minute seems to be either get the ball in the hands of Makai Lemon or get the ball in the hands of King. No, I'm getting that wrong. King. No, they're walk-on running back.
King Miller, yeah.
King Miller, yeah. Those seem to be the 2 guys that they really want to get the ball in the hands of. So I wonder if him playing so much in the slot is just a matter of them trying to get him the ball, because they give him a lot of sweeps, they give him a lot of stuff. I would love to see USC test out Lemon on the outside, see what they got, just so we could get a more well-rounded picture of him. But sad thing is, John, I don't think we're going to see that this year anyway.
No, it doesn't seem like it. Like I said, those two games before this past week, his ADOT was higher. He was doing bigger routes, and they were against quality opponents. So that's why. I mean, not to say that I ever changed my mind, but I was ready to be out on him. And then it's funny because we did that grudge match, and the week after the grudge match, he had 2 receptions for 18 yards. So of course, I'm just dancing all over my co-host grave at that point, And then he has his 2 best games of the season, and then he has another poor game, or poor-ish game after that. At least counting stats wise, points wise, sure, whatever. I don't know how. Yeah. I don't think we're going to expect him to throw too many passes in the NFL or anything like that. So but I feel like that's kind of the perfect example of Mekhi Lemon is like he's going to have good games. He's going to have down games. That's just who he is. And I mean, we can say that about every player, but I think the highs and lows are a little bit broader with him than maybe a guy like a Jordan Tyson, Elijah Serrat, somebody like that, So obviously landing spot and everything, all that kind of stuff matters. But yeah, I think I'm comfortable at 105 there.
Love it. So Lemon is locked in at 1.5. We've seen, this heavy influx of wide receivers in this draft so far. Are we sticking at that position at 106? Are you going elsewhere?
I considered it, but now we're really getting into the question marks of, is this player coming out? Is this player not coming out for me? There's a couple players that I know for sure are coming out, but I'm not quite ready to go that way yet. I think I'm going to go QB here finally. And I don't... All right, so first of all, I'm going to caveat this, which is kind of cheating, but kind of not. All right. If he comes out right now, I would be drafting Darian Mensah as my QB1. I am really leaning towards he's not coming out now. For a moment, a few weeks ago, he was playing really well, and I'm like, you know what? He has like 22 games by the end of this year. Started, at a lower level and then at a higher level. I really thought he might have come out. More recently, not to say that he's been playing poorly, but he hasn't been having the huge games that he was having before. He's still putting up solid numbers and everything like that, but I have a feeling it's going to be enough, especially like Duke will probably give him a bag and just say like, hey, stay one more year, that kind of thing. So if he comes out, this is where I would take Darian Mensah. I don't think he's coming out. So I'm going to take Fernando Mendoza, which is my next. They're almost essentially tied at this point in Beth. So like they're getting really close. Mensah was way higher for a while. Now it's getting to the point where Mendoza's kind of catching up, or maybe Mensah's falling off, whatever you want to say, a little bit of both. I can't say that I'm absolutely in love with Fernando Mendoza. There's a reason why I'm taking him at 106 and not 101. The things, I have a threshold. I wrote an article about it on DLF 3 years ago, I think at this point. I have thresholds I look for with big time throw rate and intended air yards. And it sounds stupid because I'm definitely that guy that's like, don't ever just use one metric to see if a player is good or not. But we can look at these two metrics and combine them together, and it almost gives you like a can they or can't they, almost. I'm not saying it's perfect or anything. Obviously, there's always going to be outliers and things like that. But if you don't meet the threshold of 5% big time throw rate and 9.5 intended air yards over a course of your last 2 seasons, if you don't at least meet those thresholds, it's so rare for you to actually be good in the NFL. Generally speaking, you're going to end up being a backup. You're going to be, something like a high-end backup or a low-end starter, something like that. A very good example, a recent example, is Michael Penix. People were falling in love with Penix. He got drafted so highly and all that kind of stuff. He's been pretty bad as an NFL QB, and guess what? He fell into that range where he was just at the cusp, maybe a little bit below it, and it's like, yeah, you don't quite meet that threshold. But there's been so many players that either have or haven't, and it works most of the time. And so I kind of just look at it and go, can you? Well, Mendoza's just right at those lines, and he's not quite where we'd want him to be. He's at 4.2% big time throw rate for the last 2 seasons. Now this year he's right at 5. So he's meeting the threshold this year, but he didn't last year. He's at 9.0 intended air yards for over his last 2 years, and I think it's maybe a little bit higher this year. I'd have to look it up, but he's not at that 9.5 that we'd really like to see, or he's right at that threshold where it's like he's so close. So all that being said, I think, that's where I lean back to. He's had really good receiver help this year, especially, and everything. So obviously, we're going to sit here and go, oh, he looks great. Well, we can look at the receivers and say, yeah, there's probably a reason why. So, all that being said, I'm willing to take him here at 106. I think he still has. I mean, he's shown he's fairly safe with the ball. He's shown he can complete passes. He's not some Anthony Richardson out there throwing 50% or anything like that. The adjusted yards per attempt are great. The QBR is great. A lot of things that I like to see. He's obviously getting pumped up in the draft space and everything as well. So he should get good draft capital. So this is where I'd be willing to take him. Honestly, I'm not overly excited, which you probably can tell by now about him. So this would probably be a pick that I would want to trade out of or try to trade the pick for something else or something like that, because I wouldn't necessarily love it unless it was some amazing landing spot. I wouldn't necessarily love taking him here, but this is also where I would feel comfortable taking him.
So this is maybe where I go my biggest hot take on the show, I would say, and it's quite odd because whenever I look at the system I've got, not the model I've got, the system that I've got, John, Mendoza's actually really, really high up near the top of it in terms of quarterbacks, and I can't not assign him points here and there for what I've seen, but I think he's got bust written all over him. To just see when he takes that next step up. You look at the amount of time that he has to throw at Indiana, it is sometimes comical how long he's able to stand there because that offensive line is obviously doing amazing work. And then he's got these great receivers, there's really good tight ends there as well that he's able to throw to. My big thing on him is when that offensive line doesn't do his job, sometimes he can get out, he's kind of a janky runner, kind of like a Kirk Cousins kind of runner where you're like, oh, how'd that work? A bit odd. But my big thing on him is, man, I think he stares down his number one target. So I did an exercise on him. I see my screen is frozen now. Hopefully you can still hear me. Oh, I'm back. An exercise.
We could hear you, just couldn't see.
Yeah. An exercise for the viewers to do. The next time you pull up a clip of a highlight or a full game of Indiana, when he takes a snap, pause the video, and I bet you can tell where he's going to throw the ball. Because he locked in and all he does is stare exactly there.
Yeah.
He did have problems with interceptions before. I think he'll get found out at the next level and we could see a lot of interceptions. But he can also clean that up. These players aren't the completed package just yet. Mendoza, like I said, he has got the points and the scores to be right up there in the model that I'm doing, the system that I'm doing. But yeah, there's a lot of red flags for me with him and it's busts all over. But at the same time, Superflex, John, at pick 6, sometimes you just got to take a risk on a quarterback because he could end up being the real deal. So I don't hate the pick either.
Well, yeah, and the funny thing is, so many times, like if you know anything about the Devy space, which obviously you do, then so how many people are still possibly hyping up Drew Allar just because his size and his arm strength and stuff like that. And, a lot of times you hear about these guys and it's like, well, it's just their size or it's just whatever. Well, at least with Mendoza, he actually does hit some thresholds, but he's also 6'5" and 230 pounds or whatever. So you have that as an added benefit. So it's one of those things where I think the NFL is going to fall in love with him. I think they already have. And even if we're both sitting here going let's pump the brakes a little bit. And I did actually look at the numbers. So he's literally at 5.0% big time throw rate this year, right at the threshold I'm looking for, and he's at 9.2 intended air yards, just below that 9.3. So I mean, it's so close, and I never want to be like, oh well, he's 0.3 away, so he can't possibly make it, or whatever. So I don't want to be that guy. Like I said, I think there's a lot of good things leaning his way, but that doesn't necessarily mean all of a sudden he's just going to be some stud either in the NFL.
Yeah, exactly. I think the fact that he's a QB going mid first round, that kind of does show you there's definitely still question marks about Mendoza, but he's locked in at 6. Where are you going next at 107?
All right, I'm still not ready to go running back. I'm really not. And I'm sure there's people that are like, "What do you mean? You got to go running back here." I'm just not ready, and it sucks because there's so many wide receivers I'm looking at here that I have no idea. But I'm just gonna hope and pray that Eric Singleton Jr. comes out in this class, and I'm gonna take him here at 107. I really think he should, but at the same time, I understand. This is pretty down year. This is probably not what he hoped for when he transferred from Georgia Tech. And, so I'm thinking, maybe he'll stay and he'll try to transfer to a better school, have a better situation, then try to get first round draft capital or something like that. That being said, he could easily be one of the fastest, if not the fastest guy at the combine. He has like 10.2 100 speed. You know, like he has like maybe not Olympic level, but like damn good speed. And he's a solid wide receiver. We've seen him hit the 26% market share for his team, and then this year, it's been down, but I mean they've had some of the worst QB play you can have, and on top of that, he's had Cam Coleman, a true stud, and my wide receiver 2 overall in Devy ahead of him at Auburn. So like I'm kind of like I was talking about with CARNELL TATE before. I'm not going to discount a guy because he has great wide receivers ahead of him or next to him on the field. And so, you couple that with the bad QB play, and you can kind of talk away some of the like issues that we've seen this year with Singleton. And he still had big games. He still like looked really good when needed, and he still has that big playability. We just did the comp episode on the Debbie Devotional, so I'm going to go back to it over and over again. But my comp for Singleton Jr. was Jordan Addison, and I think you can see that a lot with him and with and then think about how Jordan Addison's been behind J. Jeff his entire NFL career. So what if Jordan Addison was the one for a team instead of behind a player like Justin Jefferson? We don't even know exactly what the ceiling could be for Jordan Addison necessarily, and I kind of feel the same way about Singleton here. So 107. I don't know if he's coming out, but if he does, I'll be all over him.
I was kind of hoping he was one of my players. I was like, I'm going to get a lot of Singleton in like the second kind of round because he had such a down season. So hearing you take him in the first breaks my heart a little bit, John. So maybe I'm not going to get so many.
But remember, I'm not the guy that goes with consensus. So like I'm sitting there saying 107, and then consensus is going to be like, nah, 203.
I'll take that all day. Can we keep it there? Can we just keep it at 203? Because I'll love. I think he's super crafty, super fun. Like down here for sure at Auburn, but
we can go back to the Jackson Dart take from last year. I want to say I had him right here around the like 106, 107 range. We'd have to go back and listen to it to know for sure. I know for a fact in a DLF article in January, I put him as my 106, and I said people are going to be surprised by that. He was according to NFL Mock Draft Database.com, at that point he was supposed to be a third-round pick, and then obviously ended up being a first-round pick. Now he's like Debbie QB4 for most people, and that story's told. But point of the story is I had him at 106. I got him in most of my leagues around like 201, 202. I'm trading up. I have 40% Jackson Dart right now because of where you were able to get him, because consensus hated him. Like they were like, oh, I've heard this about him, I've heard that about him. He's in the Giants, he's behind Russell Wilson, he's behind Jameis Winston, this and that. And next thing you know, you're taking him at 201, 202. I think I even got him at 204 in one league. And it's just too easy. So stuff like that, like Singleton goes around that. Yeah, I'll have 100%.
Absolutely love it. So he's locked in at 107. Who's following Eric Singleton Jr. at 108?
All right. All right. So this is a fifth-year player, and no, you know what? All right. So I'm going to switch because I'm not baking in draft capital with these players right now. I'm just looking at how Beth sees them and everything. So I'm going to switch it up. I think I'm going to go Casey Concepcion here. He's a player that I've been kind of hot and cold on, and I've never really known exactly how to feel about him, but I will say this year has been pretty telling. I don't think that Marcel Reed's exactly like the greatest QB ever in the history of college football, and yet Casey Concepcion's done a little bit of everything. He's been the short yardage guy, he's been the long the long distance guy, the big play threat. He's been a little bit of everything. The 33% market share, is definitely up in that elite territory that I'm looking for. And he's just, as much as I love Mario Craver, and I know he's been hurt recently and everything, but as much as I love Mario Craver, Casey Concepcion's even kind of taken a step ahead of him and been like, hey, you can have it, you can have this role next year, but I'm going to go ahead and take the role this year and then go on to the NFL. So I'm not I can't say that I'm like his biggest fan or anything like that, because there's definitely been some downsides, and and things that we haven't loved to see in his sophomore season and even in his freshman season. As much as like it was great to see what he did, I never really saw like the big playability in those first 2 years. Now in the third year, all of a sudden we're seeing it, and so that's where I'm like, all right. So I'm not his biggest fan, but I do like him here at 108. There's another player that I technically have ahead of him, but I think when you start mixing in draft capital and landing spots and all that kind of stuff, Concepcion will probably jump ahead of him.
I'd love that in a sort of year where there have been so many transfers, and a lot of them are kind of maybe not gone fully to plan. That transfer from NC State has done wonders for Kessie Concepcion's draft capital for sure. And what I just really like about him is now all of a sudden, you kind of mentioned that lack of big players. Now when he gets the ball, it's like everything's a punt return. It's like he's really taken that craft of punt returning. I don't know if he did that at NC State as well, but he started off slow in that offense, and as he started doing these punt returns, they got him involved more. And now it seems like he's just like, cool, everything's a punt return now. And the big plays are coming and coming and coming. So I really like Kessie Concepcion. Was he not Kevin before? When did he change to Kessie? What happened there?
I think it was year two. He was Kevin Concepcion, or maybe it was after the transfer. Then he changed to KC. I honestly, most of the time, I still call him Kevin. I think I finally did have to actually change it because they actually changed it at PFF, and so for Beth purposes, I actually had to change it to KC. But I still call him Kevin most of the time.
Yeah, it's like not quite. I wasn't quite fooled like last year. I remember being very like fooled by. I was looking at USC running backs, and I was like, why have I got like one like score for Woody Marks and then another score for like his actual name underneath? I was like, oh, I can combine these two. They're actually quite good. So I wasn't quite fooled again.
Yeah, sometimes you'll find that it definitely happens, and it's like, oh wait, and then you combine the two, or you get rid of one or whatever, and next thing you know, that player like skyrockets up your system, and you're like, oh, I should have been in love with them the entire time, but I had two different stats. So. Players, if you're listening to this, stop changing your name, or like do it like as a recruit, and then like if coming out of high school you're like, you know what, I want to be Hollywood Smothers instead of Dalen Smothers. I get it, I completely get it. Don't change it after year two or whatever.
Yeah, I understand. You got Eugene Wilson must be called Trey. I'll take that. I'd want to be called Trey as well. I think if I was Eugene, I would go with the Trey. I think instead of that. Yeah. So you've got SE then. He's locked in at 1-8. Who's at 109? And have they had the same name the whole time? That's the big question.
Ooh, I think he has. All right. I think this is finally where I'm willing to go back to the running backs. And so I still don't even necessarily love this player, but I actually came up with the perfect comp for him on that last comp show, and it just hit me. This wasn't even like staring at numbers, like asking AI or whatever. It just hit me. I was at work, and Justice Haynes was on my mind. I think I just listened to a Devy mock or rookie mock. Justice Haynes was on my mind, and it finally hit me. Justice Haynes is Kenneth Walker III. And it just makes absolutely too much sense. Like, they have so many similarities, size wise and the play style wise, and just everything. Not much in the receiving game. They don't always break big runs, but it seems like when they do break a big run, it's a huge run. That kind of thing. And so he really did. I think Justice Haynes is Kenneth Walker III, and I can't get that out of my head now. That's why I like KW3, but obviously we've seen this year's been pretty much a nightmare for him. I'm hoping for better things today. I've actually started him in a few leagues, and I think I'm doing a lot of DFS with him today as well. So I'm hoping for much better things today with an easy matchup, but I think that's what we're going to see with Justice Haynes. He's going to be kind of a hit or miss kind of player. He can have big games, and he will have big games, but he could just as easily have your 7-point game or whatever, because it just doesn't work out. He doesn't break that long run, like that kind of thing. So not necessarily hating on the talent or hating on the player. It's really going to take the right fit. And unless he's on some amazing offense where they're just scoring touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, I'm not sure that he's going to be that consistent player that you really love to have.
I've had a real problem recently, like the last 2, maybe even 3 years, trying to come up with a grade for players in that Michigan team, I find it really difficult sometimes. Like I don't know
Yeah.
why. Like it just feels like they're not really. I mean, I'm not saying they're not worried about offense, but it feels like they're always just far more concerned about what's happening on the other side of the ball. And just getting that right for Dynasty or for fantasy football, I find really tricky. And Haynes is another one that I'm like, man, he could be really good, but I just don't know in this offense. Like, the big note I've got on him is chunk plays. Like, he has big chunk plays every now and again. And I kind of wish sometimes that they would just roll with it. I understand they got Underwood, who they want to kind of like develop as well. Like, I just find this Michigan team super tricky to evaluate. So it wouldn't shock me if Haynes ends up being like an absolute steal here. And it wouldn't shock me if it's like, oh, damn, what am I doing? Like, it could be another kind of work situation where, like, I really should have taken him. Do you find that with the Michigan offense as well, or maybe it's just me?
Yeah, it's just weird. There's some offenses that are just so weird that you know it's
Yeah.
tough. And I've spent years trying to tweak Beth and make it be able to pick up on things from even
Yeah.
bad offenses. And it's like obviously going to a completely different position here, but I was one of Zay Flowers' biggest stands when coming in as a prospect, coming in as a rookie. And a lot of people weren't that hyped on him, and it's like, he's not the biggest guy. Look at what he's done. The production's not really there. 4th-year guy, yada yada yada. And I'm like, yeah, go look at their team. They threw for like 1,400 yards as a team. So yeah, like he didn't have 1,500 yards because the whole team didn't have 1,500 yards. It's not possible. And so when you
Yeah.
start breaking down stuff like that, and that's when people go, oh, you're just a number cruncher. You just watch box scores and blah blah blah. It's like, no, it's kind of the complete opposite. I'm looking at that box score and I'm like, okay, but what can we actually take away from this? And saying a player like Zay Flowers can only do so much in that offense. A player like a Justice Haynes can only do so much in that offense. But we can look at what he does do and say, like, yeah, like I see big playability with him. I just don't know if I see consistency with him.
Love it, love it. And before we move on to the double digits of 110, just reminding everyone, if you're still watching and you haven't hit that subscribe button, make sure you do. You're obviously enjoying the video. So let's stick at it and let's move on then to 110 for you, John. Who have you got?
All right, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and put my flag on this player because I have not heard his name anywhere. And once again, it's a player that he maybe he doesn't come out. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not guaranteeing anything. But if Hollywood Smothers, I mentioned him earlier for a reason. If Hollywood Smothers comes out, that is my baby. Honestly, like he's almost essentially tied with Justice Haynes. And it's more that like I don't think he's going to get the love, and I actually intentionally have him a little bit lower BMI wise than I think he'll end up being at the combine. So I actually think he might jump Justice Haynes for me when it's all said and done. But I'm trying to be a little conservative and whatever, because right now I have him listed as 195. I've seen 200 and 205 already, and who knows what he could be by the time the combine comes. So I'm trying, like I said, I'm trying to be a little conservative, but with Justice Haynes, we talked about how he has the big play ability, but it's not necessarily consistent. He's at a 7.8% big time run rate over the past 2 years. Justice Haynes is. Hollywood Smothers is at 12.4% over the last 2 years. You want to talk about big playability, like that's what we're talking about. And then on top of that, Smothers actually has more of a receiving game. So you're seeing almost a 3 complete down a workhorse profile on top of everything else. And so the only thing you can really point to is necessarily the size and say, oh, he's not the biggest back. Maybe a team or a coach won't love that. But I'm willing to put my stamp here because I haven't heard too many people talking about him. I'm going to put my foot down and say Hollywood Smothers 110. Like I said, that's my baby. It's another player that I'm like, I don't really care where he goes. I'm going to end up with so much of it.
And it's quite nice as well. We talked about, like, obviously Casey Concepcion at NC State and how he struggled to pull off those big plays. Hollywood Smothers having no issue really being able to do that. And the notes that I've got on Smothers don't have loads, not watch a load of NC State, but what I've got is he's got that really, really good combo of having good vision, but also these like really quick cuts, these nice cuts. Do you have anything else that you could add on to? Because I'm sure he's not a name that is fully in the zeitgeist yet, John. What else do you love about Smothers in particular?
Honestly, just when you get a guy that can be over that 10% big time run rate, it's such a huge stat for running backs. It could be the difference between being, and I'm not comping him to Jahmyr Gibbs, but it could be the difference between being a DeAndre Swift or a Jahmyr Gibbs, like that kind of thing. It really can be. And it's like, do you have that big playability or do you not have it? And I think he's shown that he definitely has it. He also has games where they hit some of that tougher competition where he kind of disappears and everything, but I feel like every player has that. So I'm not going to hold it against him too much. And I just think it's one of those things where if he really hits the right, maybe a better comp, because like I said, I'm not comping him to Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'm not truly comping him to Trevion Henderson, but maybe Henderson is a slightly better comp for like what you can expect or hope for. And I could see a similar trajectory where like maybe he doesn't really do anything in the beginning of year one, but by the end of year one, all of a sudden he's taken over a backfield and he's a stud, and you're possibly winning championships or Scott Fishbowl or whatever because of Hollywood Smothers.
Oh, please don't mention the Scott Fishbowl. I'm doing so bad. It's honestly
no.
a disaster. It's been the injuries and like it's a whole thing. You got to get a little bit lucky as well. But don't look up my team, please, if you're watching. Let's move on quickly to 111 before anyone looks up my team. John, who you going at 111?
Okay, I'm gonna do it again. I'm putting my stamp 2 players in a row. Okay. And I'm going to go back to that comp episode here in a little bit. But first, I'm going to mention the player. It's Deuce Robinson. I think that he is not even getting remotely enough love. It's actually kind of wild. And I get it because in the beginning of the season, especially like against lower competition and everything, it was just too easy to think, okay, it's just a big man, run fast, beat the FCS defender and whatever. Except for it's continued the entire season. He's still big man, run fast, but he's doing it against Clemson, and he's doing it again against Duke and whoever else in the ACC, Miami, and all these other teams. And I kind of thought that Deuce Robinson was going to fall down Beth, like as the season progressed. And he's actually done the complete opposite for me. And so I went through and I tried to look at players who he comps like. And remember, Deuce Robinson came into college as a tight end prospect, but they immediately switched him over to wide receiver at USC. He broke all the year 1 0 theories, if you know what that is from campus2canton.com. Like he broke all that stuff. He did everything you would want him. I think 350 yards as a true freshman. Did a lot of what you would like to see. Things didn't really happen the way that you would love them to happen in year 2, but that USC team was kind of broken after Caleb left and all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of throw that season almost away. He obviously saw that. Writing was on the wall. He transfers over to FSU. And even though FSU hasn't been like the best team that you've ever seen in your entire life or anything like that, he's been the focal point the entire season. And it's just not going away. And so I came up for my comps for the player. I came up with a realistic comp and then a ceiling comp. The realistic comp, you'll probably be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. The ceiling comp, you're going to be like, hey, John, you're out of your damn mind. So the realistic comp for Deuce Robinson is Darren Waller. And I'm not even necessarily saying that he's going to transfer back to or transition back to tight end, but he obviously has the size and the ability to do that. He'd probably have to put on 10 or 15 or maybe 20 pounds or whatever in order to do that, but I think he has the size, the athleticism, and all that kind of stuff to do that. But honestly, the numbers really match up really well. And we know Darren Waller obviously wasn't a perfect... It's difficult to comp players to him because he kind of had a weird thing going on with drug use and things like that. So I'm hoping it's not going to take as long for things to work out. But if you look at like who they were as college players and even as NFL players for Waller, it really seems to make a lot of sense. Very similar size, athleticism, all that kind of stuff. My ceiling comp for Deuce Robinson, and it's kind of wild when you look at their numbers, how similar they are. Not necessarily hitting the highest points like a Mike Evans, but he is so close to Mike Evans.
Wow.
It's not like it would not blow my mind if he were to turn into an Evans. And I mean, what have we seen over Evans' career? He's been one of the most consistent players, but he's also, there's been years where he's had 15 touchdowns. There's been years where he's had 3 touchdowns and things, but he's just been a consistent wide receiver throughout his entire career. And I also think that he's had pretty poor QB play for most of his career, Mike Evans, that is. So who knows who he could have been had he had actual good QB play in most of those years. And once again, it's the absolute ceiling for Robinson, but their play style, their size, their speed, like everything is so similar that I could see in the right fit that you get a Mike Evans level career, or I mean, no one's going to have a Mike Evans level career. Like, that's just unheard of or unbelievable, but something to that effect. Maybe even if you get 80% of Mike Evans, 75% of Mike Evans, you'd probably still be pretty damn happy at 111, right?
Oh, I mean, yeah, you'd be over the moon for sure. It's really good. I've just been scrolling through my notes on Deuce Robinson, and it sort of starts off like a LOL, like John. What was he called? Johnny Wilson, was it? Yeah, Johnny Wilson. Remember the guy that was at Florida State who ended up transferring to be a tight end, and then it sort of goes into like, oh, hold on, like this guy's he's actually really, really good. Like it goes from being like just a really good deep threat to like amazing one-handed catches, like 3 touchdown games. Like he is a proper, like, if you don't, mind your P's and Q's with him, he'll wreck you. Like you have to really make sure you've got your top corner in this guy because he's a mismatch everywhere he goes. He's surprisingly, that is the word that's coming up a lot as I'm just going through my notes. It's the word surprising. Like he's surprisingly fast, surprisingly good at this. Like you look at him and you might think he's a sort of big lumbering kind of guy. He's not. He's a real weapon. And depending on what team he goes to, that could be really, really interesting to see what he can do. So I love the pick of Deuce Robinson. It was just today I was adding extra notes on him, just being like, yeah, I really like this guy. And I was going to bring him up in post-draft, like any kind of sleeper players. I was going to mention him. No, I don't have to, John, because you're so on the ball. So absolutely love it. He's locked in at 111. You got one more pick before we get into some sleeper players here and there. But who's at 112?
All right, so I did those are honestly my last 2 running backs that I'm really willing to even consider in the first round. I just don't see it. I don't love this running back class. In fact, I would say a lot of them are probably going back to school. The ones that I would even mention after this. So I think you will not hear me talk about another QB. Now, like I said before, if Darian Mensah comes out, then I'm perfectly happy to have Mensah and Mendoza in the first round. I'm leaning towards Mensah not coming out. There's no other QBs I would touch in the first round. You couldn't pay me to do it. I know a lot of players are pushing up Ty Simpson. Hopefully they watched last night's game and maybe they're going to come off of that a little bit. Like I've been completely out on Simpson for the longest time. I don't see it. But there's one more wide receiver, and the funny thing is, it's going to be considered a lazy comp, but I think it's the perfect comp, honestly, because it's 2 TCU players, and it's Eric McAllister. I believe it's Eric McAllister Jr. Eric McAllister Jr. and his comp is, and my mind just went blank. Who's the player for the Chargers that went to TCU?
TCU Chargers, Quentin Johnston.
Quentin Johnston, thank you. I don't know why my mind just completely blanked, but he is Quentin Johnston with hands. That's who Eric McAllister is.
That's a dangerous player.
Right? Imagine Quentin Johnston. Like, essentially, like, look at what Quentin Johnston has done this year, or at least in the beginning of the year, and that's what I see Eric McAllister doing. And, like, their numbers are so similar. Like, everything's so similar, except for there was always so many question marks with Quentin Johnston. And, like, that was one of the years, I don't know if you remember, but especially for a while, people were trying to push Quentin Johnston up to wide receiver 1 in that class. And it was just always like, what are we talking about? Like, I want nothing to do with that. He's not that guy. And, of course, if you were trying to push Eric McAllister up to wide receiver 1 in the class, I'd be like, no, you're an idiot. But here at 112, give me Quentin Johnston with hands. And, yeah, like, I'll take that upside because, he might not be the most consistent wide receiver, but he could be an Alec Pierce. He could be, somebody like that, like that big play that wins you a week. And so, give me that at 112. I actually think he's better than Alec Pierce. So like it may be Alec Pierce plus, like that kind of thing. Like I said, Quentin Johnston with hands. So yeah, I love everything about him. The only really knock on him is he's a 5th-year player. kind of had a slow roll, getting into, being the guy at TCU and all that kind of stuff. But once he has become the guy, and he transferred over, so he was already the guy at a lower level, and then he transferred up, and then they were like, "All right, you got to wait your turn." And then now a year later, he's like, "Hey, look at me, I'm a stud."
Yeah, if you want to know what he's all about, just go back and watch his, I believe it was, I've got on here week 4 matchup when he went for over 250 yards and 3 touchdowns in a single game, which is, I mean, special to say the least. You just do not see players doing that unless they have like a true talent. So McAllister is a hell of a lot of fun to watch, a real downfield threat. And yeah, Quentin Johnson with hands, look out, because that's a real dangerous player. John, that has been absolutely brilliant chatting to you. We're just ticking over the hour mark, but I still want to hear, what have you got in terms of sleepers? Can you give me like 1 or 2 names maybe, and then maybe I'll hit you with the highest rated name on my list that you've not mentioned yet. How about that?
Sure. Well, I might mention him here. I'm going to mention a few names. I have a player that very well could be going back, and I would even almost say probably is going back to school, but he does have the ability to come out this year, and it's Deshaun Bishop out of Tennessee. He's been a stud, and he would be my next running back, but I'm kind of leaning towards him going back. And then I'm sure people are like, what about Jonah Coleman? He would be after Deshaun Bishop for me, right there in that mix for running backs that that I'd be interested to see where they land and all that kind of stuff. For wide receivers, I am probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Ian Strong fan, and I think that out of Rutgers, I think he has, like, you want to talk about a player who's just not really not really getting any kind of hype or whatever because of the team that he's on and everything. But if you actually go look at him, and he kind of has a boring name too, Ian Strong. I mean, the Strong part's cool, but Ian, whatever. It doesn't make you think of superstar, but go watch him play football and you'll see like Malik Neighbors in his game and stuff like that. Like, he has like big play, huge star ability. I'm obviously not comping him to Malik Neighbors, but that really big play ability that you're not going to see too much at Rutgers. However, he does it, and he does it on a fairly consistent basis. So Ian Strong would probably be like one of my next picks here. And then Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama has been a guy who's just kind of like Mr. Consistency, like never been like a true stud, but just really just kind of goes to work and does what he's supposed to do. So yeah, I don't hate Jeremy Bernard. In fact, I think he's actually been kind of hurt by Ty Simpson being the QB this year. If anything, I expected him to kind of take a step forward this year in year 4, and that really hasn't happened. If anything, he's kind of fallen off for me. So I think he'd be right around that mix. And then Omar Cooper Jr., Elijah Surratt's teammate there, is another one that I'm really going to be interested in seeing where he goes, if he comes out, of course. He doesn't have to come out. So if he comes out, I could easily see him being a player that I'm all over in that 2nd or 3rd round.
Absolutely love it. It's actually a tie. These 2 players are the ones highest up. Outside of QB, we kind of touched on a couple of the QBs, so we'll not go there, but I don't think we've mentioned either Chris Bell Jr. or Denzel Boston yet. What are your thoughts on those 2?
So I do not mind Chris Bell at all. I think he, unfortunately for him, I think we already have the prescription for who he is, because we saw, man, I'm doing really bad with names right now, but we saw another player on his same team last year do almost the exact same thing and then go be a late round pick and not even be able to hit the NFL or do anything for the NFL. It transferred from Alabama. I cannot think of his damn name right now, but he did the same exact thing that Chris Bell has done this year previously, and is like, well, if we already saw him do it and then he essentially become nothing in the NFL, why are we expecting Chris Bell to do anything all that different? I think that he obviously has athleticism. He obviously has big playability. I think that I'm a little scared of Louisville wide receivers right now, because we've already seen some of them, not really do what we might expect at the NFL level. And I am probably the biggest detractor. I don't even want to say hater. I have no hate or disdain for Denzel Boston, but it's more for his stands, his fans. There's people trying to push Denzel Boston up into like wide receiver 3 territory and stuff in the class, and I'm like, what have we seen that makes you think that? In fact, Denzel Boston missed this past week. We just saw a true freshman in Desmond Roebuck go out and essentially have just as good of a game, if not better of a game, than Denzel Boston's had all year. And he's a true freshman, and Boston's a fourth-year player. Boston is a year 1-0, going back to the year 1-0 theory. He's an okay player. He's not terrible. Like, to put it into perspective, he is Debbie Beth's wide receiver 62. And so, like, you're considering I have probably 2,000 players in Debbie Beth. So, I mean, that's not saying he's terrible, but wide receiver 62 overall, that's more in your Dane Key realm. That's more in your Nick Anderson realm. Like, that's, get Caden Lee, players like that. Or it's like, yeah, they've shown flashes. They've done things, but, never. Now, he's been more consistent, but I think we see that as a senior. When you're dealing with true freshmen as your competition, you're going to be consistent. You're going to be that guy for your QB. But we don't see huge games. We don't really see big plays for the most part. It's a lot of like decent plays and okayness and things. And my comp for Denzel Boston, which people will absolutely hate, but I love it, is N'Keal Harry. I really think he's N'Keal Harry, and I see a lot of similarities there. And so I think that when it's all said and done, I don't want to necessarily say any player is a true bust, but especially for where people are comping him or hyping him up to, I think that Denzel Boston's going to be a bust.
Love it on the hot seat. Got to get those spicy takes on the hot seat. Absolutely love it.
Of course.
John, that has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. Before you leave, can you just remind everyone listening, where can they find all your great work online?
You can find me at Dynasty Coach A on Twitter. Obviously, I post all that. We have a podcast, The Devy Devotional, where we talk about all these players every week. We do a live stream every Tuesday on Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel. The pod comes out and the Devy Devotional, and that goes out to all of your major feeds, your Spotify's and Apple Podcasts and all that kind of stuff. And then, as much as I love talking about Devy and rookies and all that kind of stuff, I have created all of this stuff to be better at Dynasty. And that's why I created dynastyworkshop.com. I have all the tools you could possibly ever want. And I was telling Mags before we jumped on here, I'm like, this is one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I'm the president, but I'm also a member. Like, I'm literally setting lineups using the tools and things. And I'm in 30 Dynasty leagues. There's absolutely no way I could ever possibly take the time. There's not enough time in the week for me to set all those lineups and do all that without the tools that I've created. And obviously I trust them because I created them, but I've tried to make it so where it shows you that you can trust them and all that kind of stuff as well. So go check out dynastyworkshop.com. I'm pretty sure there's a free month on there for promo code for everyone. If there's not, slide into my DMs. I'll give you one. You get a free month. Check it out. Use it as a backup or whatever for the last couple months of the Dynasty and everything season. And that's basically where you can find me and all my work.
Absolutely love it, John. Guys, make sure you go on and checking out the Devy Devotional and, of course, dynastyworkshop.com. John, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you once again. And, of course, thanks, everyone at home for listening as well. That wraps us up for another mock draft of this 2026 class. But before you go, just remember, for anything Dynasty you need to know, keep it locked on the Certified Inferno. See you later.